Bonjour, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session about early warning in a VUCA world. If you're wondering what VUCA stands for, we come to this, be a little patient. So, I guess that every one of you is somehow involved in decision-making, be it in a function like strategy, sales, innovation, R&D, supply chain. Lots of decisions happen every day, right? So we know there are good decisions. They come in time, they are confident, based on information, based on insights. And there are bad decisions. They come too late, or they are just uninformed, or there is no decision even, which can be even worse. So this is more about decision-making in general, but we will relate it a lot to the composites industry. In the next couple of days, like we heard, there's a lot of talk about composites industry per se, a lot about the different applications and supply chain, value chain, all about regulations and all the trends, the technologies around that. Valona is coming from a different perspective. I come to this in a second. So this is a great opportunity on day one, in the very first morning, to set the scene a little bit and open the mindset for this. What does early warning, what does information basically mean for decision making? Because we found that there's reason to really consider this process in this industry. It seems there's lots of ambition to drive innovation and to drive circularity topics, but it all needs to be professionalized, and that is what we will talk about a little bit. But before we come to this, and before we really fasten the seatbelts, a little bit about myself. My name is Carsten Gayer. I'm one of the many co-founders of Valona 20 years ago, or more than that. Now I'm Managing Director Germany and France, and I've been working on many projects related to market research, competitive intelligence, also including the composites industry, especially in the early years of the century, when it was already becoming a hot topic in the automotive industry, the lightweight per se as a topic. Of course, I also helped a lot of companies to improve their intelligence process next to this. And what we do as Valona, you can see from the title, so we basically focus on improving the infrastructure regarding decision-making in a company like yours. How do we do this? We integrate quantitative and qualitative insights based on trusted sources, all sorts of languages, vertical-specific sources, industry-specific and centric sources that we can combine. And most of all, we provide with our AI, which is purpose-built for this purpose, and our platform, we generate these deliverables that you can see on the bottom, which includes, for example, trend radars, foresight, scenarios, financial analysis, performance reviews, and AI deep research capabilities. So that about Valona. Looking at this picture, imagine or picture yourself on a boat out at sea, and which kind of scenario reminds you more of your daily work and your daily situation, your daily business situation? Are you sailing confidently, navigating correctly, correcting the course if needed, or are you surprised by unpredicted events, which makes you overreact like hell? I guess we all can agree that it's more the right side of things, especially with the given more recent events. It is always very much surprising what we get. And this is what we call in a concept VUCA, and VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Just to give you an example for volatility, incidents like the one that we have just recently seen in the Gulf region, they drive, for example, very fastly. They can drive energy prices, and they go up and down like hell. An example for uncertainty is if you are dependent on certain decisions on the tariff negotiations, for example. There's some likelihood, but there's no certainty. You don't know exactly what will happen, and it's not in your hands. That's an example for uncertainty. Complexity, of course, the most known example here is probably the regulation framework, for example, in the European Union. Last but not least, what does ambiguity stand for? it is basically even adding complexity because certain trends can interact with each other, which give you another layer of complexity as you do not know what information to believe in. So we are all living in this concept of VUCA. We are making decisions in this concept of VUCA, in this landscape, and there needs to be a professional, sophisticated way to analyze information to come to good decisions. As we can see from this slide, companies today are lacking confidence, they are lacking foresight, they are lacking information basically to do the right decisions. And that is, of course, a scenario where we think that it should be professionalized. And all about this in this VUCA world, the question is whether you in your company have it all covered or whether there's some function that takes control on intelligence processes. Do you have an impact on this? Do you have stakeholders driving this process? This is something that we can also maybe later on discuss at the booth. That was all pretty general in terms of what VUCA means, but if we look into your industry, and we heard already most of those keywords, Valona looked at the industry, and we noticed there are basically three main drivers, main trends that we find very essential, especially because they happen at the same time, which gives it another layer of complexity. So looking at sustainability and circularity, we heard this, of course. That's one of the main drivers and the key topic, the hot topic in the industry. It used to be also a very craft industry, human produced process, but of course it's getting more professional, more industrialized, but still there's a lot of room for digitalization and automation. Last but not least, the overall geopolitical turmoil is a combination to some extent because it relates, we will come to this. And this scenario tells us that there's, especially in this industry, a little bit need to professionalize the intelligence decision-making process. Looking at the first trend, circularity, of course, everyone knows that composites are hard to recycle. And of course, landfill and other technologies have been developed, like pyrolysis and solvolysis and other technologies. But still, of course, regulation is always going on and pushing you and pressing the industry to come into some compliant production and recycling strategies. What does this mean? Of course, that it used to be a kind of compliance topic and a necessity, but we need to really look into this more as a differentiator and see it as a chance to position us as a company that is ready for the future and that has, like you can see from the statistics, 20% have already moved into a winning strategy, but the other 80% not. And this is very interesting because those big OEMs like Airbus and BMW, Siemens, they all put it into their contract that they need to have a clear expectation about a recycling strategy, obviously. So, key message, it's a necessity, it's a compliance thing. No, it is more becoming a strategic thing. It's becoming a more strategic differentiator and a value per se to have circularity covered. The next trend that we saw that, like I said, it is kind of traditionally a process which is very human focused as well, with laying the plies and having autoclave ovens and all these things is capital intensive, time intensive, and it's not yet at that rate as we would need to see it, for example, in automotive industry. So there's a clear need to look into more automation using artificial intelligence, using digitalization. And as you can see on the right-hand side, there are 4 different levels that we consider to be important. First of all, like I said, AI and digitalization, like digital twins in the process, but also like in the testing, in the observation, machine vision process, there need to be more automation, robots, and things that are currently available and getting into reality as we speak. So the third thing is 3D printing also in this context. It's not a new topic, but of course it finally also found its way into this industry, looking at printing molds or even printing short fibers, composites. The last trend is thermoplastics are coming up, and they are ready to be applied in certain applications. And you need to look into this. So lots of options for strategic decisions, and that is actually what is very difficult in a VUCA world, because where do you base your decisions on? What to take into consideration and how to avoid hectic last-minute decisions. Because the window of opportunity is closing, this means, like I said, if you are not ready, then the majority may already have done those steps, and then you're behind and you do not have the first mover advantages like competitive advantage, sustainable advantages, and learning curves and cost structures are then closed already. The third trend that we see basically is everything about geopolitical developments, and a couple of figures here. We just looked at the volumes. 24, the data, is about European Union production of composites, like finished and semi-finished materials, and this is around this the number 2.35 million tons, which per se is a decline towards the last year or the year before that. And to be honest, it is even a decline over 3 years, so we are actually there where we were with 2012. We had the same volume, there was no development on the volume side. And interestingly, globally, of course, the industry is growing, very much like 4%, close to 4%. And so this means that this is not just a snapshot. Europe is falling behind in terms of the volume. And other regions like China, North America, or APEC, they are really the drivers in that sense. Most critically, this has an impact on the three most important applications, looking at, for example, hydrogen storage and transportation. But the point is that there's a lot of expectation of having the compliance right and having also a very cost-competitive structure in that area. Second thing is about EV. Of course, everything about battery storage, and also body parts. The point here is that automotive industry requires automotive rates. It needs to be really fast. It needs to be also automotive prices, so very cost competitive. And exactly that, as we have seen, is maybe an issue for Europe from this perspective. Third trend. Oh, that was the third. So that was enough, I think, to digest. And the thing is this now bad or is this good? And you don't need to answer, but the thing is that every challenge can also turn into an opportunity. And obviously, when you do your homework, circularity, don't see it as a necessity, but proactively come up with a strategy, differentiate yourself, and do the right choice, do the right decision to go into this or that option. The second thing that we discussed, the automation race. Of course, the automation race can be won. You just need to decide into which applications or which kind of options you have, and then be among the first ones, and that gives you competitive advantage again. Last but not least, the trade shifts and new competitors. Most importantly, you have visibility on what's going on. You need to really understand across languages who's coming up, who is a player that might be relevant for your activity. So, but how do you do this? This needs to be really professionalized. You cannot do this in the old way. So we think that there's enough reason to change the pace on how to structure the decision-making process per se, to come to the right decisions. The question is here, and these are rhetoric questions, are we always sure that there's a dedicated team that takes over competitive intelligence, market intelligence requirements? Many times we see no. There is no team, especially like in craft industry, like not that much developed industries, like maybe the composites industry. Second thing is, do they actually report into the decision-making process? Do they report into strategy? Mostly we see that if there exists some kind of teams like market intelligence, they produce deliverables and they are not directly tied into decision-making, which is of course a waste. The third thing is, can the intelligence teams actually focus on what really matters? Providing value to the strategic decision makers, giving them opportunities, options, recommendations? Or do they have to, considering there's lots of information available, thousands of signals to monitor, or does most of their time go into actually this process to produce a newsletter. We can go a little bit into detail what this 80-20 means. You can see on the left-hand side that this is what reality means. So intelligence people spend most of their time collecting information, aggregating information. Maybe they produce some regular deliverables like a newsletter or something like this, whereas they have only 20% of their time, which goes into really supporting strategic decisions. All these things that we just discussed, which is very important in your industry right now to be prepared. Do they have the time? No. Do they have the capacity? No. That's actually something that needs to be flipped around. So ideally, you would spend 20% on mostly automated processes to collect the information, get everything in the radar, and be visualized in the radar, and then you can take the most of the time to really come to the so what. What does this mean? What options does this offer to you? So flipping this around from a more reactive to a proactive decision making, this is very important. You can also see this from another perspective, on the time scale. Typically, decisions are made or typically something happens, like in the middle, there's a change, hectic research, a lot of requirements from top management. We need to understand this and this and this, and then fewer and fewer options as time goes by. And then there needs to be a decision as soon as possible before the other companies react faster. So this is, of course, a very stressful situation. Whereas this might be a more smooth, automated process where you look at early signs that are available. You can see, for example, individual messages about capacity changes or new plans or new technologies being applied. If you continuously monitor those, put them in context, you have much more decision window opportunity to prepare your decision, to create scenarios, to evaluate the options, and then you have a more relaxed time to do the right decision, obviously. So how can Valona help in this context? Like said in the beginning, Valona is focusing on helping this infrastructure, or setting up this infrastructure in your organization to improve more confident, faster decision making based on really, truly secure insights. And where do the insights come from? Like I said, we have, for example, across all languages, we can dive into everything that is, as a language-wise, we can dive into all sorts of messages, but also we can combine it with quantitative data, company financials that automatically are shown in a dashboard. And that is really something that helps you to funnel the early warnings, the hard information, everything, no matter what language or what kind of quantitative, qualitative information it is. It can also be internal information that you have in your organization, to funnel this into platform and to process it with AI to produce deliverables that you can actually take into the boardroom because they are decision ready. And that supports decision making. This can be trend radars, this can be financial analysis, or you name it. Here's an example. This is a little bit small font, but you can see this live at our booth. This is a trend radar about composites. And it shows you really what is going on, and you can put your emphasis on certain developments that you would like to monitor in more detail, and you can do your own assessments. What do you think based on the other information you have? Where is the journey going? And then this is something you can visualize and produce narratives for your C-level. Very important decision-making tool. On the right-hand side, you see just an example how you can benchmark your competitors' earning data, for example. It is out within 3 hours when it's published and automatically put into a comparable benchmarking format. So you do not need to spend days to do this financial analysis. Also on the right-hand side, you see how the AI helps to create this foresight narratives based on individual thousands of news. You can easily get the pattern right, what is going on behind this big wall of text. And this is where we use our AI, for example. So we come to an end of this session, and I would like to invite you to really come to our booth and see those deliverables in action. We can show you live how this works. We can discuss how you can use this in your environment. be it that you're in a composite industry or in an application industry, it doesn't really matter, it works everywhere. And as much as we talk about trends in this area now, we are also here to listen. So what I would like you to do is maybe scan this QR code on the top right side. You can also do this later on at our booth, and just share what you see as trends in the industry. And based on your input, we will collect this during the next 3 days and provide you with analysis back of what the whole community has come up with. These are the trends that we might have missed in our little presentation. So thank you very much for your attention. See you at our booth in Hall 6, the other hall, B90. And if you have any questions, of course, feel free to ask, because we have 4 minutes left. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.